Hello class and welcome to week 3 of cognitive psychology. This lecture video will serve the purpose of reviewing your week 3 module activities as well as providing a brief overview of what memory is, and that is the topic of this week. Just a reminder, look into your announcements to read any updates that I have for the course. Just wanted to give you a couple housekeeping things. Number one, I know some of you were concerned about the course being interrupted because of the coronavirus. However, this course is not affected considering the it's all online. So I just want you guys to be mindful of that. And if you do have any further questions or you need some assistance or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me and email me and keep me updated on that so we can work together to come to some sort of compromise. So yeah, just wanted to mention that, and let's jump right in. So for this week, you will be needing to read chapter chapter 5 on memory structures and process. And you have another reading assignment. It's a article that is attached here, as well as my lecture video that I'm recording right now, as well as this other additional supplemental video that will be focusing on learning, memory and learning, and things like that. And lastly, you'll have your discussion board for this week in terms of weekly assignments, and then you'll also have an assignment that's due. So while on the topic of the assignment, so this assignment is similar to the one you submitted in week 1. So it'll be a paper, and you'll be given a prompt. So here's the prompt that is provided. And further in the week, I'll have like an update on this assignment as well to give you any additional information and details. So you'll be needing to write a 3-page essay. You guys did a really good job on your first essays. I really appreciated the fact that you incorporated, your APA source assignment information. Y'all provided, the required number of references. Just be mindful of that too as well. There was a few that did not have the number of page numbers correct. I do dock a few points for that. If you don't have, say for instance, if it says 3 pages, I require you to have 3 full pages, not 2.5, not 2 3/4, 3 full pages, as well as 3 references. And you guys did pretty great job on this as well. So you'll be needing 3 pages of text and 3 references. Your 3 references at this point can be 2 peer-reviewed articles in your textbook. So it's not as strict as it was for the first assignment. And here's an outline and a breakdown of the possible points that you can receive. Also, just a reminder, I really did enjoy how you guys broke down had your subheaders. It really made the flow of your papers go really well, and I really appreciate that. So continue doing that for this assignment as well. Also, there will not be abstract required for this assignment, so you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk to you about for this week's weekly activities. And that paper will be due, of course, Sunday by midnight. So let's jump right into the mini lecture. So let me see. How do I zoom this out? There we go. Let's zoom this out a bit. Sorry, I should have been more prepared for this. Okay, so that should be visible for you guys. There we go. All right, so that's perfect. So the first chapter is the only chapter, is chapter 5, memory structure and processes. So for this chapter, of course, we'll be talking about memory. And my main topic of discussion for this topic is for you to take a personal just thought on what is memory. Is it a process? Is it a structure? Is it a system? And what do you think specifically for this material? What do you think a memory is? What does it consist of? What do you think of when you think of memories? What comes up for you? What feelings? And things like that. But ultimately what it is a complex process that requires all of those three things: process, structure, system. It involves acquiring, storing, and recalling information. So why is this a necessity of life? What do we take from this? And I think personally, I think it varies for each person. So we learn from our memories, but in the event of that we cannot keep these memories, what happens? What goes on? And I think that the process of obtaining a memory, storing that memory, and recalling that memory is such a complex process that we have yet to determine all the knowledge on what memory can possibly do. And I think when I think about memory too as well, I think about possible diseases that come up, like Alzheimer's, people that do lose their memories, or even not as permanent. If you get a concussion and you have a traumatic brain injury and you have short-term memory loss, like how that affects you in so many ways when you lose those memories and you lose a little bit of a piece of you. So we're going to talk about memory in the three processes that we discussed. We're going to talk about it in a process, we're going to talk about it in a structure, and we're going to talk about it in a system. So many psychologists and theorists contributed to the process of memory. So with Aristotle, he was influential in discussing how memory is like a wax. And I think that's a great way to describe it, because it really is. It can be molded, it can be melted, and it can be remolded over time. So we can develop a form of memory, we can lose that sort of memory, and we can recreate that memory over time. And I think that speaks to how complex and how amazing our minds are, considering when it comes to memory. He also believed it's a sort of a filing system for information, and it can be organized in different ways. So take, for instance, you and your siblings have a memory of going to a water park or in something, someone getting hurt. Your memory of that system is filed into my sibling getting hurt. That memory from your sibling is, we went to the water park and I got hurt. And the memory of, say, for instance, your parents is a different memory overall. Because they not only have to worry about the child that was hurt and that memory developing over two siblings. So you remember how the child interacted, and you remember the child that got hurt that interacted, and then the sibling, how they responded to that certain situation. So I think it's interesting to point out that, as it mentions, our memory is a filing system, and we can recall and recode and code different memories in different ways. And also, it's a collection of interdependent processes. So we process it in different ways. Basically, what we previously touched on with the other components of this slide. So along those same tenets is that, memory is also malleable. It is, as I mentioned before, it's like a wax. It allows us to create, different ideas and schemas and thoughts of our own world. It connects us with others. It provides our own personal sensory mechanism. It's how we operate on a daily basis, and how we learn for ourselves and others around us. So like I mentioned before, memory is a huge component of who we are and how we see things and how we perceive things. So there's so much information and knowledge that we have on memory. So let's move on to the next slide. So the process in terms of encoding, storage, and retrieval. There's three important processes in memory, and each of which involve different areas of the brain, and that works differently for each person. So what may be standard for you may not be standard for someone else. So encoding is one of the processes is which information is entered into our memory. So as I mentioned before, it's very subjective in how we experience each process. So a memory that we encounter is encoded by our own process of information, or by our own processes and retrieval of that information, or storage of that information. And then storage, and that's ultimately, that's how the information is kept within our memory, how we store it in that specific part of our brain, how we categorize it, how we file it, touching on the previous slides. And lastly, retrieval, and that's the process in which we perceive a memory that is ultimately pulled back together from our storage process and how we encoded it in the first place. So this 3-process system happens with each and every person. And as I mentioned before, it's unique in its own way, and it intertwines within one another. We have to have these 3 components in order to encode, store, and retrieve those information that we remember. If one of those is damaged, then all of them are affected. If one of them is missing, one or the other or all of them may not be as effective. So that's important to consider too as well when you're thinking and processing memory. So if you say, for instance, if you have a traumatic brain injury, like I mentioned before, maybe your storage part is missing, and you have that encoded information, and it'll be hard to retrieve that information. Or for instance, if your encoded memory is damaged, you have that storage, but it may not be the same memory that you remember before. You can retrieve it, you can store it, but the way you process it and the way it entered our memory data bank, if you want to call it that, is different. So, model of memory. That's a tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. So on the same lines as how many types of memories there are. We have different types of memories. Some are sensory, which are brief. Short-term memories that can be considered, 30 seconds or less. And that's unless they're encoded. There's long-term memories, which are substantially more stable over someone's lifetime, considering short-term memories and sensory memories. So memory has, it's been classified as according to duration, whether that's sensory, short-term, or long-term. And I discussed those before. So they're stored in specifically hypothetical areas. So we have sensory memories, like I discussed, very brief memories, short-term memories. These are longer than very brief memories, but shorter than long-term. And then you have long-term memories. Those are longer held memories. Let's move on. I feel like I have a problem with these slides every single time I record a lecture video. Okay, so sensory memory. This is the briefest form of memory, and it alternates between brief after images. So you'll have varying levels of brief memory. And it's oftentimes only available for a certain amount of time period, a second or two. So, and that can vary, from 1 second or 5 seconds, things like that. And it's very difficult to study. However, a theorist, George Sperling, he was an American psychologist. He wondered, and he developed, this hypothesis and theories on how, do we really only comprehend a few images at a time, or do we perceive much more than that? And ultimately, he decided to try, a different method for having participants recall what they had seen. And that's partial report method is what he developed. And there's a couple videos on this theory and this method. And I will provide a link to you guys. If you want that video or if you want some more information on this, I can provide that for you. I do have a link to that study. So, short-term memory. As we mentioned before, there's many levels of memory, short-term, long-term, sensory. So I won't spend too much time on that, but I do want to discuss that with you. So as I mentioned before, I don't want to spend too much time on short term, long term, because you guys will review that working through your textbook. Badly is motto. And as I mentioned before, I want to make this really, really brief video for you guys. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on. It's just the general basis of what short-term, long-term, and sensory memories are, and what that process is. Is it a process? Is it a structure? Is it a system? And that's ultimately how memory is such a necessity of life. So yeah, and I think that's pretty much all I want to talk to you about. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about your assignment, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be available at any time, so don't hesitate to reach out to me. And that is all. I think I will have another video uploaded for you early next week. So I know I've been getting it around the morning, afternoon times, but I think for next week I'll have it a little bit earlier. So yeah, that is all, and I will talk to you next week. Have a good one.